It started with the invitation. A delicate cardstock square, embossed in silver, with her name in elegant script at the top. Join us to celebrate. It read. A special evening for a special woman. I stared at it for longer than I should have, the weight of its implications sinking in. This was no ordinary party. It wasn't just a casual get-together of friends. It was something else entirely, something that felt wrong from the moment I held it in my hands. She had handed it to me with her usual bright smile, her laughter bubbling over as she talked about all the little details. The food, the decorations, the music, everything had to be perfect. She even mentioned the guest list, rattling off names of people I knew, people she'd known for years. She made it sound as though everyone was coming together to celebrate her, and only her. But something about the way she spoke didn't sit right. Her voice had that airy, carefree tone she used when she was trying to distract me from something. It was a tone I had grown to recognize over the years, a warning sign that I was supposed to overlook the details she didn't want me to notice. At first, I thought I was imagining it. Maybe I was just being paranoid. Maybe it really was just a birthday party, or an anniversary party, or whatever excuse she had cooked up. But the more I listened, the more certain I became that there was something beneath the surface, something she wasn't telling me. When she mentioned the location, an upscale restaurant downtown, I felt a pang of unease. That place was out of character for her. She was always more comfortable at home, in casual settings, with close friends. But now, she wanted a venue that was lavish, elegant, and very, very public. It didn't feel like her at all. Why all the fuss? I asked her, trying to sound curious rather than suspicious. She shrugged, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. It's a special occasion. I want to make it memorable. She left it at that, and I didn't press her. Not yet. Instead, I watched her carefully in the days leading up to the event, noting how she seemed more preoccupied than usual. She spent hours on the phone, speaking in low tones and quickly hanging up whenever I walked into the room. She had packages delivered to the house, boxes she quickly stashed in the closet, promising me that they were just decorations or party favors. It wasn't until I overheard her on the phone one night that my doubts turned into certainty. I hadn't meant to eavesdrop. I'd been passing through the hallway, on my way to the kitchen, when I heard her voice through the slightly ajar door. She was speaking in that tone she used when she thought no one was listening, soft, intimate, full of quiet laughter. And then she said his name. The name I hadn't heard her say in months. I froze, my hand hovering above the light switch. My heart started pounding, and I suddenly felt like I couldn't breathe. I didn't hear the rest of the conversation. I didn't need to. That one name was enough. It explained everything, the sudden decision to throw a surprise party for herself, the lavish venue, the secretive phone calls, the hurried packages. It all clicked into place. This wasn't a party for her. Not really. It was for him. He was the one she was really celebrating. He was the reason for all the effort, the excitement, the attention to detail. The party was a facade, a distraction to keep me in the dark. And for weeks, I had played along, completely oblivious. When she came out of the room, still smiling, she didn't notice my expression. She kissed me on the cheek and told me she was going to bed early, that she had a long day tomorrow with final preparations for the party. I nodded numbly, watching her walk away. My chest felt tight, and my thoughts raced with questions I didn't know how to answer. I waited until I heard the bedroom door close before I went into the living room. I sat down on the couch, staring at the invitation on the coffee table. The silver script now seemed mocking, almost cruel. I turned it over in my hands, feeling the smooth surface under my fingertips. The words blurred as I stared at them, my mind drifting back over the past few weeks, picking apart every moment, every detail, every hint I had missed. The truth was right there in front of me, written in the subtext of her actions. She had planned this entire evening to celebrate her relationship with him, the one she had kept hidden from me, the one I had tried to convince myself wasn't real. Now, there was no denying it. She had turned our life into a carefully constructed lie, and this party was the crowning achievement of her deception. I sat there for hours, the invitation still in my hand, until the room grew cold and dark. Eventually, I forced myself to move, to get up and go to bed. But even as I lay down beside her sleeping form, I couldn't escape the weight of what I had discovered. The party was just a few days away. I didn't know what I was going to do, but I knew one thing: I wasn't going to let her get away with it. The morning of the party arrived sooner than I expected. The sky was clear, the air crisp. The kind of day that felt filled with potential and possibilities. But as I woke up and glanced over at her still sleeping figure, the weight in my chest hadn't lessened. I could feel it there, gnawing at me. The knowledge of what she had done, and what she was about to do, hung in the air like a storm cloud. She stirred, stretching and yawning, and when she saw me, she smiled. "Morning," she said softly, her voice still thick with sleep. "Ready for tonight?" It took effort to keep my expression neutral. "Yeah," I said, my tone as even as I could make it. "Should be fun." Fun wasn't the right word, but I couldn't tell her that. I couldn't tell her what I knew, not yet. I still didn't have a plan. All I had was the crushing certainty that tonight wasn't going to be the joyous celebration she was pretending it would be. Throughout the day, she flitted about the house, checking and double-checking every last detail. I watched her carefully, trying to read between her movements, to find any sign of guilt or hesitation. But she was good at hiding it. Too good. Her excitement seemed genuine, her laughter easy. It was hard to reconcile the woman I saw in front of me with the one who had orchestrated this betrayal. When the time came to leave for the restaurant, she was positively glowing. She had spent extra time getting ready, her dress perfectly chosen, her hairstyle just right. She looked radiant. I hated that I still thought that. I hated that she could look so beautiful while carrying this secret so easily. In the car, she chatted away about the decorations, the menu, the friends who were coming. I nodded along, not really hearing her words. My mind was elsewhere, running through scenarios, trying to figure out how this would all unfold. Would I confront her in front of everyone? Would I pull her aside quietly? Or would I say nothing at all, let her think she had pulled it off, and deal with the aftermath later? When we arrived at the venue, the restaurant was already buzzing with activity. The private dining room she had reserved was elegantly decorated, every detail exactly as she had described. Friends and family were mingling, the sound of laughter and clinking glasses filling the air. It was a scene out of a magazine, picture perfect in every way. She dove right in, greeting guests, thanking everyone for coming, making sure everything was running smoothly. I hung back, nursing a drink and watching her work the room. She was in her element, radiant and confident. But my stomach twisted every time I saw her glance at the door, as if she were waiting for someone. Waiting for him. And then he walked in. Jason. I recognized him immediately. I had seen his face in photos before, though she had always dismissed him as just a co-worker or an old friend. But now, seeing him here, I could feel the truth settle over me like a heavy blanket. He was taller than I'd imagined, with a casual confidence that made my skin crawl. He smiled at her as he approached, and she lit up like a firework. My grip tightened around my glass. I watched them hug, their embrace lingering just a fraction too long. Her friends and family were busy chatting and laughing, oblivious to what was happening right in front of them. To them, Jason was just another guest. Just another friend. But I knew better. I stayed back, letting the scene play out. I wanted to see how far she would take it, how bold she would be. As the night went on, I caught glimpses of them together, whispered conversations in the corner, shared smiles across the room, the way her hand brushed his arm when no one else was looking. It was all there, out in the open, if you knew what to look for. And I did. I saw it all. The more I watched, the angrier I became. Not just at her, but at myself. How had I let it come to this? How had I been so blind for so long? The questions swirled in my head, each one more painful than the last. But I still didn't know what to do. I felt frozen, trapped in a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. As the night wound down and guests began to leave, she made her rounds, thanking everyone for coming. Jason stayed behind, helping her gather decorations and leftover party favors. I watched from across the room as they spoke in hushed tones, their heads close together. I couldn't hear their words, but I didn't need to. I could see it all in their body language, the way they leaned into each other, the way she smiled at him. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore. I set my drink down and walked over, my heart pounding in my chest. She looked up as I approached, her smile faltering for just a second before she recovered. "Hey," she said, her tone light and casual. "Having fun?" "Sure," I said flatly, my eyes flicking to Jason and then back to her. "It's been quite a night." She hesitated, her smile tightening. "I'm glad you're enjoying it." I stared at her for a long moment, my mind racing. The words were right there, on the tip of my tongue, ready to burst out. But I stopped myself. Not yet. Not here. I would confront her soon enough, but it wouldn't be in front of him. Not like this. Instead, I nodded slowly, my gaze steady. "Yeah," I said. "It's been unforgettable." By the time we got home, the air between us was thick. She had spent the entire drive talking about how much fun the party had been, how everyone seemed to enjoy themselves, how the food turned out perfectly, how relieved she was that nothing had gone wrong. I barely spoke. I just kept my eyes on the road, my hands gripping the steering wheel tighter than I realized. Every laugh, every cheerful remark from her, felt like another twist of the knife. I parked the car in our driveway and turned off the engine. She was still smiling, still riding the high of the evening's success. She turned to me, her face glowing in the dim light. "Thanks for helping make tonight so special," she said. "It meant a lot to me." I forced a smile, my stomach churning. "Sure," I replied. "Glad you had a good time." She leaned over and kissed my cheek, her perfume filling the small space between us. "I'm gonna head up," she said, opening the door. "I need to get out of this dress. You coming?" "In a minute," I said, my voice steady. "I just need to grab something from the car." She nodded and disappeared inside. I watched her through the window as she climbed the stairs, her silhouette disappearing into the shadows. I stayed in the car for a few more moments, gripping the steering wheel, trying to calm the storm of emotions brewing inside me. I knew I couldn't wait any longer. I had to confront her. I had to know the truth. When I finally went inside, I found her in our bedroom, brushing her hair in front of the mirror. She had changed into her usual comfortable clothes, a pair of sweatpants and an oversized hoodie. She looked relaxed, at ease, like nothing had happened. But I couldn't shake the image of her and Jason together, whispering in the corner, sharing those lingering smiles. I leaned against the doorframe, watching her for a moment before I spoke. "So, you and Jason seemed pretty close tonight." She froze, just for a second. It was so subtle that anyone else might have missed it. But I saw it. I saw the way her hand paused mid-brush, the way her shoulders tensed just a little before she turned to face me. "What do you mean?" she asked, her voice light but guarded. I stepped into the room, crossing my arms. "I mean, the way you two kept sneaking off to talk. The way you smiled at him. The way he looked at you." She blinked, her expression shifting to something like confusion. "He's just a friend," she said, the words coming out too quickly. "I told you that." "Is he?" I said, my voice calm but firm. Because from where I was standing, it didn't look that way. Her face flushed, and she put the brush down. "You're reading too much into it," she said. "I was just thanking him for helping out with the party." "That's all it was?" I pressed. "Just a thank you?" She sighed, exasperated. "Yes, that's all it was. I don't know why you're acting like this." "Because I know," I said, my voice sharper now. "I know he's not just some random coworker. I know you've been talking to him, texting him. I know you planned this whole party just so you could see him." Her eyes widened, and she opened her mouth to respond, but no words came out. The silence that followed was deafening. She looked down at the floor, her hands clenched into fists at her sides. "Tell me the truth," I said, stepping closer. "Just say it. Say what you've been hiding." She looked up at me, her eyes glistening with tears. "I never meant for it to get this far," she whispered. "It just happened." The room spun around me, and I felt like the ground had been ripped out from under me. The words were like a punch to the gut. I had suspected it, hell, I had known it deep down, but hearing her say it out loud was something else entirely. "How long?" I asked, my voice barely audible. "How long has this been going on?" She hesitated, her lips trembling. "A few months," she admitted. "But it wasn't serious. Not at first." "Not at first?" I repeated, my voice rising. "So when did it become serious? When did you decide to betray me?" She flinched at my words, tears streaming down her face. "It's not like that," she said, her voice shaking. "I never wanted to hurt you. I never meant for this to happen." "But it did happen," I said, my anger boiling over now. "You lied to me. You made me believe everything was fine while you were off with him. How could you do that? How could you look me in the eye and pretend like everything was okay?" "I don't know," she said, her voice breaking. "I don't know why I did it. I was confused. I was." "Don't," I snapped, cutting her off. "Don't make excuses. Don't act like you were some innocent bystander in this. You made a choice. You chose to lie. You chose him." She sobbed openly now, covering her face with her hands. I wanted to feel sorry for her, to comfort her, to tell her it would be okay. But I couldn't. Not after what she had done. Not after she had shattered the trust we had built. I turned away, running a hand through my hair, trying to catch my breath. The room felt stifling, the walls closing in on me. I needed space. I needed to think. I can't do this right now, I said, my voice shaking. I need time. She didn't say anything, just nodded silently, her shoulders heaving as she cried. I left the room without another word, closing the door behind me. I stood in the hallway, my mind racing, my chest aching. The truth was out now, but it didn't feel like a relief. It felt like the beginning of the end. The days that followed felt like wandering through a maze in the dark. I woke up each morning with the faint hope that maybe the weight in my chest would be lighter, that the knot in my stomach would start to loosen. But it didn't. Instead, the questions continued to swirl, the betrayal continuing to echo. I knew the truth now, but knowing didn't bring clarity. It just made everything more painful. She tried to explain. Over and over, she tried. Each time, her words came out tangled, an avalanche of apologies, excuses, and scattered reasons. She would say it wasn't about me, that I hadn't done anything wrong. But every time she said it, it felt like salt on the wound. If it wasn't about me, then why had she done it? If I wasn't the problem, then why hadn't she come to me first, before turning to him? We started avoiding each other in our own home. I'd sit at the kitchen table for hours, pretending to read the newspaper, pretending not to notice her moving around the house as quietly as possible. She spent more time in the bedroom, behind a closed door. We still exchanged words occasionally, but they were brief and hollow. The kind of conversations that happen when two people are just occupying the same space, rather than truly living together. One night, she tried again. She came into the living room where I sat on the couch, staring blankly at the TV. I wasn't really watching it, the screen was just background noise, something to drown out my thoughts. She sat down on the edge of the couch, keeping a careful distance between us. I don't know how to fix this, she said softly. Her voice startled me. I hadn't heard her speak that way in days, quiet, tentative, as though she were afraid of breaking something even more than she already had. I turned to look at her. She looked tired, her eyes puffy from crying, her shoulders slumped. I don't either, I admitted. She let out a shaky breath. I never wanted it to get to this point. I never wanted to hurt you. I made a mistake. A terrible mistake. I clenched my jaw. I'd heard her say those words before, and they never made it any easier. A mistake. I said, my voice calm but cold. You don't accidentally keep texting someone for months. You don't plan a party to see them. That's not a mistake, that's a choice. She flinched, and for a moment, I felt a pang of guilt. But it was quickly swallowed by my anger. If it was just a mistake, I continued, you would have stopped. You would have told me before it went this far. You didn't. Tears welled up in her eyes again. I know, she whispered. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness. I don't even know if I can forgive myself. I turned back to the TV, even though I wasn't watching it. I don't know if I can either. The words hung between us, heavy and suffocating. I heard her draw in a shaky breath, and when I glanced at her, she was staring down at her hands, her fingers twisting together in her lap. For a brief moment, I saw the person I'd fallen in love with, vulnerable, unsure, desperate to make things right. But that didn't change what had happened. It didn't erase the hurt. She left the room after a while, and I sat there alone, the sound of the television washing over me. The silence between us wasn't just about the lack of words. It was about the chasm that had opened between us, a gap I wasn't sure we could bridge. I couldn't tell if I even wanted to try. The truth was, I didn't know what was next. I didn't know how to move forward or if moving forward was even possible. Every time I thought about her, about us, about the life we had built together, it felt like staring at a photograph of a place that no longer existed. We were just remnants now, fragments of what we used to be. That night, as I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, I realized something that hit me harder than anything else. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't yelling, I wasn't accusing. I was just tired. Tired of trying to figure out what went wrong. Tired of waiting for her to say the right thing that would make it all better. Tired of hoping for something that might never come. And that's when I understood, the anger had been keeping me going. But now that it was gone, all I felt was emptiness. The days had turned into weeks, and yet the weight in the air hadn't lifted. The house was quiet, too quiet. It wasn't just the silence between us anymore, it was the absence of something deeper. That laughter, that warmth, that ease we once shared had been replaced with a fragile, uncertain truce. We spoke only when necessary, and when we did, it felt like walking through a minefield. Every word, every glance, every step had the potential to trigger another explosion. I spent more nights on the couch than I cared to admit. It wasn't that I couldn't go to bed, it was that I didn't want to. Lying next to her felt impossible. The space between us was too vast, and I couldn't bridge it no matter how hard I tried. Even now, after all this time, I didn't know if I wanted to. One evening, she came into the living room while I was sitting on the couch, scrolling aimlessly through my phone. She stood there for a moment, her arms crossed over her chest, before speaking. "We can't keep doing this," she said quietly. I looked up at her, startled. "What do you mean?" She took a deep breath, her shoulders sagging. "I mean, this. Us. Living like this. It's not fair to either of us." I set my phone down, feeling the tension rise in my chest. "What are you saying?" She hesitated, her eyes searching mine. "I think it's time we figure out what we really want. What's best for both of us." I stared at her, my mind racing. Was this it? Was this her way of ending things? Or was it a plea for me to say something, to fight for us, to try and salvage what was left? I didn't know. I couldn't tell what she wanted, and I wasn't sure what I wanted either. "I don't know what's best anymore," I said honestly. "I thought I did, but now." She sat down across from me, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. "I never wanted this to happen," she said, her voice trembling. "I know I've ruined things. I know I've hurt you in ways I can't take back. But I don't want to keep hurting you." I looked at her, really looked at her, and saw the pain in her eyes. She was just as lost as I was, just as unsure of what the future held. For a brief moment, I saw the person I had fallen in love with, the person who had once been my partner in everything. But that person felt so far away now, like a memory I couldn't quite grasp. "What do you think is best?" I asked. Her lips pressed into a thin line, and she shook her head. "I don't know. I just know we can't keep living like this. Pretending everything's fine when it's not." I nodded slowly, my heart heavy. "Yeah," I said quietly. "I know." We sat there for a long time, neither of us speaking. The silence was thick, but this time, it felt different. It wasn't just an absence of words, it was a moment of understanding. A moment where we both realized that the love we once had was no longer enough to carry us through this storm. Finally, she stood up. "I'm going to stay with my sister for a while," she said. "Give us both some space to think." I didn't argue. I didn't beg her to stay. I just nodded, because I knew she was right. We both needed time. Time to figure out what we wanted, time to decide if there was anything left to save. I watched her go upstairs to pack a bag, and I felt an ache in my chest that I couldn't quite describe. When she came back down, suitcase in hand, she paused at the door. "I'm sorry," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I really am." I nodded again, unable to find the words. She stepped out into the cool evening air, and I heard the door click shut behind her. And then, I was alone. The house felt impossibly quiet. I sat back down on the couch, staring at the empty doorway. Part of me felt relief that the tension was gone, that the constant sense of walking on eggshells had lifted. But another part of me felt hollow, like I had just lost something I couldn't get back. I didn't know what the future held. I didn't know if we would find our way back to each other or if this was truly the end. All I knew was that, for the first time in weeks, I felt like I could breathe again. It wasn't the breath of peace or resolution, but it was a start. A start of something new, whatever that might be.